Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, if you are still eating pudding, feel free to carry on. This, though, is the moment where I get to invite onto the stage somebody I've been looking forward to talking to for an awful long time. You may know me as the presenter of Hard Talk on the BBC World News Channel, and in that format I get to sort of lightly grill, perhaps even toast some of my guests. I don't think it's going to be quite like that today, not least because our guest today has been on Hard Talk. It was unfortunate when I was on holiday, so somebody else did it, but I saw the edition, and he certainly wasn't grilled in any sense. He came across as one of the smartest business leaders this country's produced for an awful long time. I'm going to go through a little bit of his career with him in a moment, so I'm not going to waste too much time doing that now. But please, ladies and gentlemen, give a very, very warm welcome to Stuart Rose. Stuart, take the seat. Now, Stuart, it is a great pleasure to have you here. The first thing I noticed when I saw you this morning was that it says Sir Stuart Rose and then it says Marks and Spencer. Either your name tag is very old or you just can't let go. Is it the case that even though you've got a zillion other jobs we're just about to talk about, you still have an enormous sort of emotional tie? Well,
I'm going to blame Michaela. Michaela, put your hand up. It's entirely your fault. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Great pleasure to be here, and particular welcome to our guests from overseas. But the answer is yes, I've been involved with the company, or was involved with the company, been involved, I still imply I am, for 40 years of my life. It's a long time. I still use the we word occasionally. I try and stop doing it, but it is an institution, and it's been very much part of my life.
Yeah, and it's one of the retail giants in this country. I'm very well aware that you... perhaps your most memorable encounter with a BBC journalist was my esteemed colleague Jeremy Paxman, who announced that, and in fact I think he sent you a letter to this effect, that your underpants were no longer offering him the support that they once did, and that he was suffering, I think in his phrase, severe gusset anxiety. Well, whatever that means.
I could give you the short or the long answer to this one, but I will give you the slightly longer one, and that is I did get an email early one morning from Jeremy saying to me that exactly that things weren't quite as they should have been in his view.
Do you think the problem was with your clothing or with his...
Well, to cut a very long story short, it went on and on, this email exchange. I obviously got the people involved to look at it. We didn't think there was a serious problem. We had these underpants carefully tested by lots of models the same size as Jeremy. So I wrote to him back and said perhaps he was suffering the same thing that happens to all of us, age, and and that maybe things weren't quite as well hung as they had been previously. Anyway, he was very good about it, but he did admit to me that he cooked it up in the gym some 2 years later, and it was a bit of a scam, so I was a bit...
Can I just put on the record, I've never had a problem with M&S underpants. Never had a problem.
I'm not about to show you, but neither have I.
The point about your career, and you began as a trainee at M&S, and you spent an awful lot, I think, best part of 2 decades there. Then you went off to run a host of other businesses. Some in the room will know business names like Argos and Arcadia and Booker, I think you were involved with for a while. And then you came back to the CEO job to run M&S again. You have worked in a ferociously competitive retail environment. And I think a lot of people in this room will want to know what you regarded as the keys to staying on top in that shark pool.
Well, I think, looking back, and sometimes I find myself giving advice to younger people. I work in a number of businesses today with the startups, and obviously I've got children, so I try and give them advice, not that they take it. But I think the most important thing is that if you don't like the industry you're in, get out. Because we all have to work for a long time, 30, 40 years these days. The way the government's going, you'll retire at 70 by the time you chaps get to retire, and ladies. And that's the most important thing. The second thing is that I always say to people, what do you want to be? And they say, I want to be a chief executive. And I say, are you sure you want to be a chief executive? And they say, yes. I said, well, first of all, do you know what it's like? It's actually quite lonely. You'll lose a lot of friends. It's actually quite stressful. There's only one chief executive in every business, so your chances are a bit more limited. Be sure you really understand what you want, because there's lots of other jobs that you can do in an organization which is fantastically fulfilling, and you can be part of a team that does that. But most important thing is, do every single job that you do, whether you're sweeping the floor, which I genuinely did do. I started sweeping the floor at Marks & Spencer, Oxford store in 1971. I knew I'd only be doing it for a month, but I swept the floor. But by God, that was a clean warehouse. And, people do notice if you put some effort in. And then when you're selling pyjamas, as I did subsequent to that, I was a bloody good pyjama salesman. I never thought that I'd be chief executive. I just thought, maybe if I do this job well, I might be noticed. And that's, I think you should look at it that way.
But there is a ferocious competitive spirit within you and a single-mindedness. I'm just thinking of one particular incident, and I'd love a little background to it, and some people may remember this one. There was a famous moment, I believe it was in 2004, when you were newly in charge of M&S, and there was a lot of talk of a takeover. Philip Green, who you knew well, because in fact you'd worked together in the past, was putting together a multi-billion-pound bid, at least it was thought he was, for M&S. You, as the new chief executive, absolutely didn't want that to happen. There was a moment, I believe, close to M&S headquarters, where Philip Green had basically spotted you just outside the office. He buttonholed you on the street. According to journalists, he grabbed you by the lapels and basically shouted in your ear hole, "Listen, mate, it's time you allowed my bid to go through." And he said, "You are a fool if you don't, because you, if you'd stuck with me, could have made 250 million quid. Is all of that true? And how close to punching him did you get?
Well, broadly it is. I mean, we might speculate on how he knew where I was at that particular time. I have very good evidence to suggest I was being followed. I'm not suggesting that Philip had anything to do with it, of course, at all. I did get out of my car. What's interesting is, because I knew there was a lot of press about, I came out of the car at the side entrance to the business. And it was at that moment I did find the door was being ripped open. I was being ripped out of the car. You were actually accurate in the storyline, but you failed to give some of the more colourful bits of vernacular that I received.
Feel free.
I couldn't possibly.
Feel free.
There are ladies and gentlemen here, I couldn't possibly use the word. The funniest moment, it was a bit surreal, was he was effing and blinding at me. He was telling me that I didn't understand the meaning of life. But at one point, it really became comical because he said, "Here, and if you don't believe me, listen to my missus." And he had his missus on the telephone who was speaking from Monaco. And what this, to this day, she said, "I've no idea, but I just thought this cannot be true. I've got his bodyguard behind me, I've got him in front of me, and I've got his missus burning my ear about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing." But the most mysterious thing was, and there is no connection at all, of course, is that when we came into the office and the security people said, "We better get the videotape of this," there wasn't any videotape.
I suppose my sort of question coming out of all of that is, how did you balance the desire to keep M&S in its existing form, keep the traditions, everything else, against the temptation to take what was an incredibly generous offer, really?
Well, listen, there's all sorts of things come into your mind when you are faced with that situation. It was the second bid I'd been involved with, but actually, without being too soppy, I mean, I personally did not feel that this company, which has been part of the British fabric of British society since 1884, it's been through good times and bad times, it's been through recessions, it's been through depressions, it's been through the First World War, the Second World War, and all sorts of other things, and has had a pretty tough time in the last 3 or 4 years during the last recession. But it's very much part of the fabric of British society. 25 million people a week go in. I said earlier, it's a taxi driver business, by which I mean everybody has an opinion about how it should be run and what it should sell, but it is there, it is much loved, and I did not think this company ought to be owned by a private individual. Clearly, that has nothing to do with the outcome, because we live in a free market, we have free market economics, and if the price had been right, then it would have been right for us to sell to the benefit of the shareholders. We thought we'd put a defence up. We put a defence up saying we think we can do a better job for the following reasons, and although it was closely fought, at the end of the day, that was the view of the shareholders. So it was a democratic decision. I was very pleased with the way it went. But of course, as I did point out to somebody at the end of it, this battle went on for some 12 weeks. Philip then buggered off on holiday, and we had to get on with running the business. So I'm not sure he didn't get the better deal, actually.
Yeah. Now,
in the end.
We both, while we're enjoying our delicious lunch, watched the WTM sort of captains of industry big thoughts about where the industry is and the challenges ahead. And I want, in that context, to reflect on your approach to challenging times in business. I mean, M&S had challenging times. You took it over when it was not doing terribly well. You turned things around, but toward the end of your tenure, again, things weren't going terribly well. And, you know, the retail environment changes so very fast, and we can talk about technology. That's changing it perhaps at a faster pace than ever before. How do, and this will be relevant to everybody in the room, how do leaders in the travel and tourism industry stay ahead of the game? What are the keys to making sure your business is flexible and adaptable enough to keep ahead of the fast pace of change we see right now?
Well, I mean, the key, you've put your finger on the key word change, and I'll come back to change in a second. I was just talking to Johan from TUI Travel earlier, and I said to him, what are the 3 things your customers want most? And of course, I wasn't surprised by the answer I got. What they want is they want a hotel that beats their expectations, they want hassle-free travel, and they want fantastic service. That is exactly pretty well to the 5 words we used to use at Marks & Spencer: quality, value, service, innovation, and trust. I can rattle those words off. They all have a meaning, and they all have a meaning for your types of customer. Change is our biggest enemy. And I'm very lucky. I've been involved in a lot of change in my life, but I'm also lucky because I like it. I actually get up in the morning looking forward to change. Unfortunately, those people who do are in the minority. My experience is that for every 5 people who like change, 95 don't like it. We all go to work the same way. We have the same sort of cup of coffee. We like to read the same newspaper. We like to read it in a certain way. Some of us open the book at the back. Some of us open the book at the front. Some of us, I mean, we all do have our favourite seats, and we don't like it when that is suddenly being changed for us. But if you do like it, and you do understand that whether you like it or don't like it, the world is changing, and you espouse that change, and you have your finger on every pulse of every change that's going on. I mean, for example, it was, at M&S, if David Beckham was partying in Los Angeles and went out to a party with a white tie on, you can bet your bottom dollar there'd be 500 blokes coming to Marks & Spencer Marble Arch saying, do you sell white ties, the following morning, right? So we get instant inputs of music, we get instant inputs of new trends coming in, food trends, travel trends, this trend and that trend. And our job is to be half a step ahead of our consumers, whether it's in my old retail profession or your travel profession, because we're in the same business, we're in the consumer-led industry. You've got to be half a step ahead, by which I mean, if you're a step ahead, you are too far ahead, the customer doesn't get it, they're not ready for it. If you're in line with everybody else, you're not differentiated. But if you're just half a step ahead, so when I open the magazine or I go online or I go into a shop and I see something and I almost didn't know I want it, but it just touches me in the right way, you'll be a leader. Now, doing that is bloody difficult.
And what's the key to that? Is that having brilliant research, brilliant sort of teams who can read where the public is beginning to head? Or do you yourself as a leader have to have your own finger or thumb on the pulse?
I think leadership does matter, and I'll come to some other bits with it. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I'm a great believer that leaders do have to lead, but I'm also a great believer that it's not all about what's in there. It's also slightly what's in there, and what's in there, you've got to use your instincts because, we are effectively still animals. We have our animal instincts, and you've got to believe it. And if you believe it, trust me, it's possibly going to happen. You've got to have all the tools at your disposal. There was a comment on that film about big data. I mean, big data is fantastic. What that data can tell you is amazing. How do we actually mine it at the moment? Pretty ineptly, whether it's in your industry and whether it's in my old industry. But there is gold in them there hills. The third thing is you cannot do it yourself. You've got to have fantastic people around you. And I'm constantly surprised by chief executives or leaders of businesses who actually don't like to surround themselves with good people because they fear the competition. I always loved surrounding myself with good people because they did all the bloody work. So, I claimed the credit if it was good. So it's a combination of 1 + 1 + 1, Stephen, equals more than 3.
All right. Now, I know you travel a lot because you sit on various boards and you have various international commitments. I happen to know that you're about to head to Australia on a flight that you're really looking forward to. But you, in one way or another, spend a lot of time experiencing the travel and tourism sector. So with your analytical and your retail experience eye, tell me what you think of what people in this room are delivering right now in terms of the way in which the industry is set up, the way it deals with the consumer.
Well, the customer, just in the same way as in electronics, the real price of electronics has come down, the real price of clothing has come down, the real price of food has come down, the real price of going on holiday has come down dramatically. I can remember taking my girlfriend, then wife-to-be, to Nice for a weekend. I think it was in 1970-something, and I don't think I'm exaggerating to say, I think I paid £600 return for 2 tickets. I mean, I went to Toulon last year, courtesy of Ryanair, for 38 quid, right? I sat next to Jon Snow quite by accident. We had a fantastic time. We left 10 minutes early and arrived 2 minutes early. So you can't, it's fantastic, the service that you provide.
I'm so pleased Michael O'Leary isn't here because the grin on that man's face would be insufferable at this point.
Well, it's actually just as Johan and I were discussing. When it works, of course, it's fantastic. It's when it doesn't work, and that's when the problems arise. But what do I see today? I see fantastic choice out there. I see the customer actually having a lot more leverage than they used to have. You know all this stuff better than I do. So you've got price visibility. You've got plenty of choice for them to do other things. So your je ne sais quoi, if you like, your point of difference has got to be that you've got to offer something that's unique. And again, I was talking to Johan about having some control over your brand so that you don't have strict price comparison. And then you've really got to have a fantastic service ethic. There is nothing that people like or loathe more than either bad service, loathe it, or like good service. And you always remember it. And if you do it, because we don't like change, which is a comment we talked about just earlier, once you get into the rut and you've got them, they'll come back. We had a great holiday last year, we had a great holiday this year. I went to the same place for holiday. Admittedly, my kids were reasonably young at the time, for 10 years.
Till they got sick of you?
Well, they wanted to go clubbing at that point. So it happens to us all.
But don't you think there's some profound shift in the relationship between the service provider, in this case, you guys in the room who are running travel and tourism businesses, and the customer, in that the customer is more empowered than ever before? And doesn't that actually scare the hell out of many?
Well, it should scare you if you can't deliver. And I'll give you a better way to remember it. It's not a bad phrase. And that is that when I was brought up in retail, we were taught that the customer is king. Let me tell you all, the customer is master of the universe, right? And if you get that bit right, you will thrive. And all this nonsense we've seen, even in the recession, I mean, just to digress very slightly, if I may, the recession is over. I'm pleased to see the UK PLC is back in business. Actually, we're going to outgrow most other countries this year. Unemployment is coming down. It's not all about London. Outside London, there's some very, very good things happening. And
do you really feel as upbeat as all that?
I think it's fantastic. I really think it's time we stop being fed up, stop being miserable, moved on. People are definitely more upbeat, and it's going to be a much better year next year. And this year has been better than people thought. But the real point is...
whatever you're on, I want some too, because...
Well, it's a little bit like, it's a bit like if you're miserable, you'll be miserable, you'll be miserable. Stop being miserable. Get out of bed and, make the change. We are all capable of making this change here. And there are lots of good things happening out there. And it's just like in retail. They complain about the shops in the high street going out of business. The only shops that are going out of business in the high street are those shops that didn't deserve to live. And in a funny sort of way, the recession's done us all a favour because it's been a bit Darwinian. It's killed off the weak and it's allowed the stronger to grow into the space that's been created. So it's the same in your businesses. You create a product and a service and an environment that the customers want, I promise you'll flourish.
But the point is... and this is where maybe we talk about technology as well, that some elements of the business are going to have to perhaps accept that they don't have much of a future. Maybe that however well they do what they do, it just is no longer a service that people frankly need. And I'm thinking now about, for example, within this area, this sector, the high street travel agent. You work for Ocado. You've seen retail change massively, and you've seen the impact that mobile and internet technology is having on retail. Is it not time to say that within travel and tourism, some parts of the offer, and I'm thinking of the high street, going in, trooping into a shop and looking at catalogues and booking your holiday like that, it probably doesn't have much of a future.
Well,
what do you think?
I'm not sure I agree. I think the mix will change, Stephen, and this is a bit like this whole issue about retail, because as I say, we're in the same business. It's about being multi-channel. You've got to give the customers the options of buying what they want, when they want, and how they want it. Take my old firm, Marks and Spencer. You would often find the case that a customer would be sitting at home and they say, "Excuse me, shall we have a new sofa?" So what they might then do is they might come into the store and look at a sofa or buy the catalogue. They would then go home and they'd research the sofa and they'd look at other websites as well. Then they might decide to order the sofa. They wouldn't necessarily get it delivered to where they live. They might want to get it delivered somewhere else, to their holiday home or this or that. But they want and expect you to be able to do all the things for them. But it did require, most of the time, which is why I don't think shops are going to go out of business, for them at some point to have some human contact. And people do like to come into places. And I suspect that, travel centres will change because in some of the big destinations, you might want to go and make some general inquiries. You might want to sit down with somebody who can talk to you through options and whatever else. But equally, you might just as well do nothing there, go home and then do all the stuff online and expect the online service and the navigation of the website to be so good that you can make the booking, be pleased with what you've got and be comfortable that when you arrive at the airport, they're expecting you. But we've got to provide all that. That's what we have to join every single bit up. Some of you are pretty good at it. Some of you are less good at it. But if you're good at it, you'll survive.
You're quite good, it seems, at retail. You have been over a 40-year career. Did you ever, or do you now even look at this business and think, yeah, I could have a piece of that? I mean, Tesco's do banking, they do insurance. You know, all the supermarket chains and massive retailers are looking at getting into different pieces of the retail pie. Could you see a huge general retailer moving into this business?
Yeah, nobody has exclusivity of their own business anymore. And, you know, disruptors are about, disintermediators are about. And if there's a profit to be made by somebody by doing something a slightly different way, which goes back to my point, which touches the chord of customers by being half a step of where they are today, trust me, whoever provides that will get that business, and if you haven't innovated it, you'll lose your business. But I think it's great. I mean, it is the epitome of a free market economy. That's it. You've got 2 or 3 stalls, they're all sitting out there. One of you is going to win. 2 of you are going to go home disappointed.
A couple of things that came out of the chat on the tape about the challenges and the future of the business. One, about sustainability. Somebody said, you know, that in the end, when you cut to the chase, the future of our planet is vital to this sector, and we have to be aware of that and take account of it in the way we run our businesses. You, when you were heading M&S, made a big point of developing a sort of sustainability agenda. At the time, people, and frankly, I probably was one of them, wondered whether it was just another example of, you know, greenwash, or just trying to sound responsible and win a few more brownie points with the general public in terms of your image. Do you think everybody here should be absolutely, genuinely committed to changing their businesses to make them more sustainable?
Oh, there's a short answer and a long answer. The answer is absolutely yes.
Well, give me the long one, because I don't want the short one.
You might have to ask me another question then. The answer is absolutely yes. And, you know, I'm quite proud of what M&S started in 2005, which was their Plan A, because it wasn't about talking the talk, it was about walking the walk. And essentially, it went out to prove that what Al Gore said a long time ago now, that you can be a sustainable business and a profitable business. In M&S's case, we proved over a 3-year period, just in 3 years, that by being more sustainable, we could be more profitable. That was audited by Ernst & Young, and the company made £50 million more profit in 2008-9 than it would have done had it not done some of these things.
Can I interrupt for a sec? I think I read somewhere years ago that you once forced most of your senior executive team to sit down with you and watch Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth.
Listen, the truth is, I went on holiday, I was a bit knackered, it was not long after the bid, and I took some books with me, and I took an easy book. This is Al Gore's book on sustainability, and it's very good because it's mostly pictures and a few graphs. And the graph that struck me was on about page 3, because on page 3 there is a graph which shows the carbon emissions, or the carbon, a number of carbon particles in the air.
Is that the hockey stick one that goes up like that?
That's been measured in the same place, same observatory in Hawaii since 1948. And it's going like that as it goes up like that. Right? And at the end of the day, if you then believe what people like Professor Bennington, who was until recently the government's chief scientific advisor, said about water and energy and food, whether the number's 30% or 50%, we're going to need 30% more food, 50% more energy, and 50% more water by 2030, right? We talk about 2030. Well, 2030 is only 16 and a half years away, right? So if you believe that a kid born today in the Western society has got every chance of living 100 years, that kid will be 84 by the time we've run out of everything, or won't reach 84. Now, most of us have got children around here, and they'll be saying to you, what did you do? Well, the answer is, can you afford to do nothing? And you have to be pretty Luddite in your views and pretty bloody-minded not to see the evidence. And even if the evidence proves to be wrong, are we prepared to take the risk of not doing something in case it's right? I think the case is quite simple. So I think everybody does need to do something. Many companies in the world today, and you are right in the middle of this, are A, big enough, and B, making enough noise and pollution around the place to have a responsibility to do something about it. And even more importantly, I'll get on my horse and you asked for a long answer, even more importantly is, I found in M&S is that even though there was a recession on, when we were talking to graduates coming into our business, and we had 20,000 applications for 200 places every year, we would finally get interviewed at the end by them saying, well, can you just tell me whether your company's got a sustainable approach? You know, do you believe in sustainability? Is it just greenwash, or is it walking the walk? And people do care about it, and they want to make a difference. And lastly, if you say to people, do you want to go green? And we used to do a lot of research on this. The answer is unequivocally yes. The problem you've got is that government hasn't taken a lead on it. This government's been particularly bad on it. David Cameron said to be the greenest government out. It hasn't been the greenest government out. It's been actually very poor for all the reasons you can come out with, but they're not good enough. And the fact of the matter is people do want to go green, and what they say to you is, please show me how to go green. Preferably, I would rather not spend more money in going green, but I started off by telling you that M&S, we proved you could do it cheaper. So, you know, it's up to you to do it.
Okay. Interesting answer. I suspect there'll be a bit of nervous shuffling among some people in this room who rely on air travel for the basics of their business. I mean, the bottom line is, however efficient aircraft engines are, airlines run on fossil fuels and probably will for the foreseeable future. If people like you say, you know what, we've got to really get serious about our own carbon footprints and our own personal place in this whole area of sustainability, we wouldn't take long-haul holidays. You, Stuart Rose, wouldn't be flying to Australia to see a few mates and chair a meeting. You know?
I agree, and it's a decision and it's a balance that we've all got to have. But in companies' terms, what you can do is you can say, look, if we're in the business of creating pollution because we send people on airline travel, although that will continue to come down, because I've got every faith, and we've already seen actually a pretty dramatic decline in emissions from the new technologies coming out of the aero engine companies. The fact of the matter is there are other places that we can mitigate the damage that we're causing. But the end result, if we don't all make some contribution, is that governments will legislate, and that's a very heavy-handed approach. And we will all like that less than we would if we didn't make some contribution ourselves. But no, none of us is perfect. We are just to remember one thing. We're using 1.5 times Earth worth of our resources. So if we've got an Earth like that, currently we're consuming an Earth and a half's worth. So we're going to have to reduce it at some point in time. I'm sure technology, which you touched on, will have a huge part to play. And there's a book shortly to be published by Jonathan Porritt, of which I do have an early edition, written by a guy imagining he's in 2050, and some of the things that we will be doing and how we'll be living. It's not all scary, some of it's fascinating, and I urge you to go and buy it, but unfortunately I've forgotten the name of it.
Well, actually, funny enough, I'm seeing him tomorrow, so I'll send you an email, I'll tell you. Well, unless you've
I've got a copy.
You've got a copy already.
We should tell everybody else to get a copy.
Well, ladies and gents, I'll be better informed tomorrow on that one. One more from me, and then I'm going to open it up because I suspect there's some great questions from the floor. So I'm going to give you time to ask Stuart a question. But I was just taken by something you wrote a couple of years ago, actually, when you were talking in the Guardian newspaper about leadership. And it's very relevant to a lot of the issues that came up on the video. I think particularly the feeling in this industry that there are some huge issues pertaining to tax and the way air passenger duty works and government regulation that you as an industry feel you're not getting a fair shake, and you want to mobilize as an industry to try and make the case to government. You said this not so long ago. You said CEOs aren't just leaders within their own businesses. They also must and need to take a lead role, for example, in the supply chain, in the areas of government regulation, areas of fair trade, labor standards, all those sorts of things. So, I mean, how important is it now that everybody in this room takes a much wider view of what their job is all about?
Well, I think it is extremely important, and it then leads you to one other thing which I think is going to become more the norm, and that is that many of us, whether they're countries, whether they're large corporations, are not big enough to tackle all the problems that are facing us in the world today, whatever those problems are. And I think the one thing that we in retail were very bad at, and I don't know how good you are at it in your own industry, but I suspect not as good as you could be, is that we need to cooperate. You need to cooperate within your own industry. You need to share experiences. You need to bulk up in the sense that 1 + 1 will equal more than 2. You need to use specialists if you haven't got that specialism. You need to espouse what the NGOs are doing, and you definitely need to go and cozy up in the, or certainly make sure you're in with the political changes of this world, because even if they don't take any notice of what you say, they can't do anything unless they know what you think.
Were you good at that?
I was.
Who did you cozy up to?
Well, cozy is the wrong word. I chose the wrong word there. But you certainly need to be there, getting your case across all the time. And quite often you'd get rebuffed, and quite often you'd get ignored. But I did find one thing, that when the retailers, who, as I said, were notoriously bad at it, actually grouped together as a force, we were always listened to, because retail in the UK is the after the National Health Service, I think it's the largest employer in the UK. So you did get some traction.
Yeah. Great. Well, I've found a lot of that fascinating. Stuart, thank you so much for answering my questions, but I suspect there'll be some very good ones from the floor. We've got roving microphones, ladies and gentlemen, and we've got about 10 minutes left, so please take this opportunity. and you won't get it too often, to quiz Stuart about anything that might be relevant from his career or your own business perspective. But we would love some questions from the floor. There's a gentleman with his hand up, and there's another one here, so let's go for it. So if you wouldn't mind, just introduce yourself and a quick question.
Sure. So Stuart, my name is Jonathan Wall. I'm Elmer Wall Travel Accountants. A very good friend of mine is a guy called Richard Fox, who was part of your senior management team. It's a question. If you make, the numbers are wrong, £600 million profit as M&S, and the expectation in the city was you were going to make 700 million, you get absolutely crucified for it. Don't you just want to shake someone's jacket or whatever and just go, we just made £600 million profit and you're kidding me? Because what you've done is amazing, but the market expectation was higher than that. How do you live with that?
Well, the short answer is absolutely yes. I mean, what you have to do is we live in that's just talking earlier to Johan again about the difference between running a public company and a private company. You know, that goes with the territory. If you have taken the shareholders' money, you have an obligation to report to them. The big difference there would have been that it's what my old boss used to say, Stuart, the only surprise I like is on my birthday. You shouldn't ever surprise the city, actually upwards or downwards. You should manage the expectations. But in terms of your absolute question, you know, is this business a bloody good business and does it deserve to get, you know, does it deserve to get bad press? Well, I'm totally sympathetic to what you say.
But there's an interesting sort of point there. Do you think, in your experience, that the city and the way it works encourages CEOs to indulge in sometimes quite damaging short-term thinking?
Well, there's been one or two quite high-profile sort of comments on that, and a resignation recently from somebody in the city on the basis that he thinks the city has become too short-term. We all think it. At the end of the day, I like to think, and it's always difficult to speak about yourself, but I like to think that in M&S we made decisions that were going to be decisions that might not have some effect for 8 or 10 years. And that's what you should do. And yes, there is a pressure, definitely, and it's a difficult one to manage.
Sir.
Hi, Chris Lee, Barclays Travel Team. I wonder what you thought of programmes like The Undercover Boss and Back to the Floor, and when you were running M&S, what policies you had about getting your senior executives into the stores to meet with more junior colleagues?
Well, I'm totally in favour of everybody being in stores all the time. I used to have a policy of going out nearly every Friday, and I never let them know where I was going.
Did you put on a wig and a moustache?
No, but I used to just turn up. I would turn up in Aberdeen at sort of 7:30 in the morning, having got up there the night before, and they would be quite surprised. Then they'd ring all the stores in Scotland and say, the boss is in Scotland, and then you'd disappear and you'd return up in Bristol in the afternoon. It was great. But that is very important. We used to get hundreds of people asking us to do, can we make a movie, fly on the wall about Marks and Spencer? I always rejected it. The answer is you're not in control of the editorials. It's very difficult. But in reality, leading to a slightly broader point, there has been a tendency to trivialise business and to make it look easy and simplistic, and there's one or two well-known programmes on the TV that do that in such a way.
You're not thinking of Lord Sugar,
I couldn't possibly imagine it. But anyway, he did actually send me a rather rude email a few years ago about the fact that I'd been rude about his programme. And I was seriously rude about it for one reason, that it gives the very bad impression. Businesses are about people, businesses are about cooperation, businesses are about teamwork. And you know, if imagining that you just get on in business by stabbing your colleague in the front or the back to get to the top is just insanity, and I think it sets a very bad example for what we're trying to do in business today, is to get people coming in and create wealth, because if we live in a society where we can create wealth to build universities and roads and do things we do, that's what we're about, isn't it? So yes, you know, be in your business, but be proud of your business, but remember it's teamwork and it's not about just a quick buck.
I totally take everything you just said, but I still would have loved to see you and Philip Green grappling on the street on the telly.
Philip, I have a much better story about Philip, and that is that during the height of the bid, he used to ring me up. I can't do the song very well, but he used to say to me, I used to phone about 7 o'clock in the morning, you just believe in happening, if I were a rich man. And he used to persecute me all the time about the fact. He said, I don't understand you, son. He said, you can't spell yacht, can you? He said, the only jet you're ever going to have is EasyJet. But, you know, I said to him, Philip, there's two types of people in this world. Those people who go to their cemeteries with the biggest bank balance, and those people who think that they've led a sort of what I call a reasonably balanced life. I like to think that I'm part of the latter.
Well done, you. Now, anybody else? Come on, we need more questions. We've got another, at least 5 minutes. Who would like to ask Stuart anything at all? We've got a mic. Can we get the mic to the front, please? Where's our roving microphone? Come on, rovers.
There's one coming.
Hopefully it won't take so long that you've forgotten your question. Just stick with it. We'll get there.
Stephen. Hello, Martin Craig, Pacific Asia Travel Association, and our members, of course, are interested in how to get to the UK more conveniently and cost-effectively. APD is a barrier to entry. Don't you find it amazing that this tax continues to go up? And do you think there is any hope of slowing it down over time?
Well, listen, this is a classic example of where you need to go and talk to legislators and talk to them about, what effect that will have on the industry. I thought you were going to ask me about the third runway, or I thought you were going to ask me. But listen, you should definitely go on to lobby on that point. I'm not sufficiently versed to know the pros and the cons, but I mean, it's not a dissimilar argument to what we've got in retail at the moment going on about rates, where, you can end up paying more rates in a store than you're paying rent, which is insane. Anything that is actually stopping the industry growing is clearly something that you should be advocating against. In terms of the third runway, well, listen, we've got to build one. I mean, I can't imagine that we're still sitting here arguing about this. The fact is, this is a fantastic country. People want to come to it. If we want to actually be part of being a competitive society in the next 50, 60 years and don't want our children to say what was the matter with them, we better go on and do something.
And where would you put it?
Well, I don't think there's an alternative at the moment, and I think they're going to have to stick a runway at the end of Heathrow or parallel to Heathrow until they come up with a suitable alternative. We know that if you're going from start to finish in UK PLC, that's going to take 25 years. We're not living in Hong Kong or in Shanghai where they can just put one up willy-nilly, and quite right so too. But planning of the estuary or planning somewhere else will take a long time. In the meantime, we are running desperately short of capacity. It's fine at the minute, providing nothing happens. And there's a good example last week when we had the wind coming through. They had to slow the airlines coming in, and the minute you slow anything down, you can't cope with it. So when it's running like a well-oiled machine, it's fine, but at some point it will have a problem, and that's going to cause us problems.
Just on that issue of Britain and its international standing, I mean, you were very passionate in your statement of positivity about where you think the British economy is and how you see a sustainable recovery really taking shape now. But you travel a lot and you even have business interests around the world. When you look at the British economy and you compare it with obviously some of the powerful emerging economies, maybe even with, I don't know, Germany and the United States as well. I mean, how confident are you that Britain can retain and maybe even improve its international economic standing?
Well, I think there's two things to answer there, Stephen. One is that, like everything in life, you can't do everything, so you should pick the priorities and what we're good at. Two examples. We are fantastic at financial services, long may we remain so. We are fantastic at intellectual property. We have some of the best brains, the best universities, and the best patent registrations around, and we should be pushing that hard. The only other thing is, to keep forcing that through, is that we've got to do something about educating the next generations, and that's in two ways. Continue to feed the intellectual power, but we've also got to feed the need for what we haven't got. And there's something in the newspaper this morning saying that we brought in 223,000 people to do jobs in the UK because there aren't enough qualified people to do those jobs in the UK. Well, that's insane. And that's mostly around engineering, which better people and better brains than I have talked about before. And it's got to happen. So that anything we can do to improve the education output and quality has got to be vital to our success. But yeah, we've got fantastic innovation. We go back 200 or 300 years. What have we not invented?
You're still a very young man. You've still got a very good head of hair. What about politics?
No, it's absurd. Listen, there's a very good example. I'll leave that with you. Businessmen make lousy politicians and politicians make lousy businessmen.
All right. We've got time for one more. Oh, good. We've got one over there. Yeah. Come on then.
Michael Hurst, an M&S shareholder. Have you got any advice for Mark Bolland?
I couldn't possibly say so. I've got that old expression. I've never commented on the business publicly or privately since I left, and it's a bit like that old adage, which I think I've got right, is that once you step off the bridge, you should never spit on the deck.
Are M&S underpants as good now as they were in your day?
Absolutely. They're fantastic. You can't have 24% market share of underpants and not have something right. Right? I think that's more of a Jeremy Paxman problem, right?
You know what? I'm tempted to say that we should leave it there. Let me just scan the room. Is there one more arm going to go up? Or will we...
There's a gentleman at the back that says to say something.
Ah. Is that a question, sir, or a...
It's an offer.
An offer? Let's hear it then. You've got a microphone there. Go on.
Sir Rose, thank you for such an inspiring speech, and Mr. Saka. I'd like to challenge you. I'd like to challenge Marks and Spencer's to a 4-ball golf with British Home Stores, ready? British Home Stores, Marks and Spencer's, HSBC and Barclays in a celebrity golf event. Do you think that would be something that you'd like to accept?
Well, first of all,
Yes, so it'll be next year.
first of all, I don't play golf.
Okay.
Secondly, as you may have heard at the beginning, I have nothing to do with Marks and Spencer, but I suggest you write to Sir Philip. I don't think he plays either, actually, but he'll come and tell you how to play it, because I'm sure he's an expert. Write to Robert Swannell, and write to the guy, what's his name, who runs HSBC. I'm sure you'll have a match on, but not with me.
Yeah, well, you know what? Before this becomes a charity auction, which is tempting, but probably not right for this very moment, I better actually draw a line under questions right now, because otherwise my timekeeping will go down the Swanee, and I can't allow that to happen. So, ladies and gentlemen, before we close this afternoon, it's in a very short moment going to be my great pleasure to introduce on stage Simon Press, Senior Exhibition Director for World Travel Market. So, Simon, get ready to come on stage. But first, ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm hand to Sir Stuart Rose. Stuart, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And thank you, Stuart. And let me just invite Simon Press to the stage to close proceedings now. Simon, it's all yours.
Thank you, Stephen and Stuart, for an absolutely fascinating discussion. How to keep true to the brand and the offering whilst keeping pace and being flexible and half a step ahead through change particularly resonated with me. Before you depart for more business, negotiation and networking in the exhibition halls, I'd like to highlight a number of key events in the WTM portfolio in 2014. Here is a map outlining all the events WTM and the Reed Travel Exhibitions Leisure portfolio, of which WTM is part of, are running in 2014. I'm going to start by highlighting the exciting new events planned for next year. In March, WTM will be hosting a new networking lunch for industry decision makers in association with ITT. So please do look out for your invites for that one. Also new for 2014 is WTM Africa in Cape Town on May the 2nd and 3rd. This second WTM brand extension as part of the wider Reed Travel Exhibitions event, Africa Travel Week, which is a full week of 3 RTE exhibitions back-to-back in the Cape Town Convention Centre. The other 2 exhibitions are ILTM Africa for the luxury travel industry and IBTM Africa for the meetings and incentive industry. World Travel Market's WTM Vision Series enter its 6th year. This series of events is designed as a mid-year conference to give the global industry the latest research, insight, opinion and networking opportunities. The 2014 Vision Series will take place in 5 different continents, with Cape Town, Sao Paulo, Dubai, Moscow, and Shanghai the host cities. Furthermore, the second WTM Latin America in Sao Paulo takes place in April. The inaugural event, WTM Latin America, was a phenomenal success earlier this year. I'm sure many of you are looking at how you can make the most of the Latin American market, making this a must-attend event. The 21st edition of Arabian Travel Market in Dubai takes place in May. Last, and most certainly not least, and I know we've only just started WTM 2013, but I do welcome you and look forward to seeing you all again here in 12 months' time. Have a productive WTM 2013, and I look forward to seeing you through the remainder of the week and later on in the year. Thank you very much.